no one can see us. We can do whatever we want.
We should just podcast.
Oh, okay. Hey guys, what's up? Matt here. Welcome to another episode of Coffee is for Closers. Today we're going to talk about OODA loop and how it refers to sales and business. Okay, if you don't know what that is, then stick around to the end, you'll find out. And we're also going to go over how sales and persuasion, and NEPQ in particular, has benefited myself and other people in just day-to-day life. So if you want to hear more about that, then stick around all the way through to the end, and we'll see you after the intro.
If you listen to this podcast, you will make your first million within 3 years. We're here to make podcasts. You really want this. You listen and review.
I think I nailed that one.
You did.
Yeah.
It was the best.
Thanks, man.
You're the
Needed
best
that.
at the intro. I mean, not the best in this room.
But the best of the people who just did it.
Yeah.
Well, then you can do the fucking intro.
Hey guys, what's up? Pat here. Welcome to another episode of Coffee is for Closers. Today we're going to be talking about the OODA loop. The reason we're going to do that is recently in a podcast we mentioned it.
We did.
And we said, hey, if you want to hear more about it, tell us a little comment. The comments came in. Just one by someone who works for us.
That's how it works here.
Yeah, here we are.
Recently, I've had a couple of different experiences, which has been quite interesting to me, where we have used the art of sales to get what we want. So it was funny. I was talking to Marco recently, and he applied for this house in Melbourne. He's just like, it's beautiful, like two-story, fantastic place, great view, all that kind of
So
stuff.
rental property to live in?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And he's just like, I really want it. And I was like, yeah, sweet, go and get it. So he provided me as a reference. And the guy called me and was like, is this real? I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, are you referring to how much money Marco makes? He's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's all legit.
Yeah.
I was like, how much money did he tell you? And I was like, oh, that's probably an underestimation.
That's conservative.
Yeah. I was like, he makes more than that. The guy was like, oh my goodness. So anyway, I had to kind of give the guy the background of him and the business and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, he didn't get the place. I was shocked. And so Marco calls the guy and is like, what's going on? He's like, oh, the owner just didn't think it was right. I think because he's like a 28-year-old guy who looks like a drug dealer. Yeah. Right? Basically is what's going on there. And so he kind of like left it for like a day or two. And then he's like, I really want this apartment. Like that. So he calls the guy and he's like, hey man, how are you? He's like, yeah, good. He's like, get any more applications? He's like, oh no, not yet. And he's like,
I'm guessing it's a very expensive apartment too,
it's not
right?
cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like crazy, but it's, I think for Melbourne, maybe it is. Maybe I'm skewed because I'm from Sydney.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was like, he's like, yeah. So he's like, well, are you still looking to lease it out? He's like, oh yeah. And then so
Just not to you.
he's just like, okay, now he's trying to find a problem. He's like, all right, cool. So he's still looking to lease it out. And so he just goes through a full like, okay, I'm just going to sell this guy into I'm the right guy for the apartment. So he's like, okay, man. So like, what are you looking for in a tenant? Like, why wasn't I a good fit? Just kind of went through that kind of stuff. And then he's like, well, what happens, man? Another 2 weeks or 2 months goes by and you don't find a candidate that's makes as much money or is qualified or has as good a rental history as me. Like, what happens to you? He's like, oh man, I'd probably lose the listing. And Mark is like, well, you don't want to lose the listing, do you? He's like, no, why not? And the guy's this, and he goes, like, I don't know, like, do you feel like my application was strong? He's like, yeah. He's like, why do you feel that way? Kind of reselling him and not him. And he's like, well, man, like, what happens if you lose this listing? He's like, oh, fuck, man, that'd be shit. It's a great listing. The owner has a couple properties with us. And he's like, well, man, like, are you really willing to settle for that? He's like, no, why not? Like that fully just took him through like solution, consequence. And then he's like, well, man, like if you think like I'd be happy to reapply. But if I did, how do you think you'd go to the owner and, get him, convince him that I'm the right guy? And he said to him and he goes, do you mind if I make a suggestion? He's sure. And then he's told him how to sell the owner. Yeah. Right. Anyway, Marco moves in next week.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the phases that he did there. So we've talked about first thing is problem awareness. So he had to create the problem for the guy. Like he's just thinking this is a a listing, no problem. Like someone will want it,
Yeah.
and so he had to create the idea that maybe nobody else does want it, right?
Yeah.
Or that,
or maybe the owner's got unrealistic expectations as to what he wants from a tenant, you know, and so he had to kind of reveal that yes, there is a problem here. Like you're looking to sell something, I'm looking to buy it, you know, and it's like you haven't done that yet, so clearly there's a problem, right? So it's like let's establish the fact that you still want to do it and that there is a problem. The next is like, what are you looking for in a tenant? You know what I mean? And kind of reinforcing some of the things that they're looking for, of which he ticks many of the boxes. And then it goes through like a consequence phase, which is really what it's all about here, is like what happens if you don't find somebody? And they just probably never considered it. And so it's like what that does is it's wrapping up some urgency on it so that the guys can, so that he can go, oh shit, like I've got to do something about this. So then he can, and then by providing a suggestion, you know, it's like, well, let's go back to the guy. And if I'm happy to help you out, man. Like I'm happy to help you. I'll reapply, put everything in, you know what I mean? And then by seeing how he would go back to the guy, like that's where you can see his sales pitch. And his sales pitch is probably trash.
Right.
You know? So what you got to do is you got to kind of then coach him on how to do it. And what you would do is you would instead of going to like, hey, I've got this great tenant and he's really, really good and ticks all the boxes, like that's not what you want. You want to go through it like a more of a problem base. It's like, hey, you know, we haven't had that many people through. I haven't had many qualified candidates just because of the market, right? I have had one very qualified candidate, and I think he might still be open if we are able to come back to him. Like, would you be open to me getting in touch with the qualified candidate? You know, and so it's like, yes, it is. So come at them with a problem. They're going to be more likely to, instead of just coming at them with like great solutions. And that's the same as in business. Like you never want, especially like in my business in sales, no one's ever going to be responsive to the referral. Hey, speak to Matt. He's a sales killer.
Right.
It's just not a productive referral. You know, it's like, hey, go and speak to Matt. He really helped me overcome think about it objections.
Okay.
That's a great,
The specifics.
that's a great referral. You know, oh, go speak to Pat. He's awesome with dogs. Okay. I know plenty of people who are awesome with dogs. Hey, go speak to Pat. He really helped my aggressive pet stop being pet aggressive, whatever, right? And so it's like, oh, sweet, nice specific problem. And especially if you teach that person how to go out there and get it, they can find the people and they figure out what kind of problem the person's having. And then from there, the referrals are far more sticky.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So we just made a video, probably be here, on, right there, on cost of inaction. So that would have been a big chunk of what Marco was doing there with the guy, right? On like, but what will happen if you don't?
Yeah.
And so I think the way that you framed that in the video when we filmed it, and you know, I'm editing it right now, that's why it's fresh on my mind, is you know, it was like cost of inaction of not doing something, right? Like not signing up for something.
Yeah.
This is the cost of inaction of like not allowing Marco to move in and therefore like losing the listing. So it's not just a case of like framing cost of inaction of like what you couldn't achieve, but it's what actually could be lost from you. Right?
Yeah. So it's like, what's the natural, what's like the logistical conclusion? You know, like, people always talk about like slippery slopes. So cost of inaction is a way to discuss the slippery slope.
Right.
You know, all of a sudden you let someone use a bathroom and then people are, you know, marrying beavers, right? Like that's the slippery slope. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, let's talk about that in a logical manner.
Yeah.
And then go, well, if you don't find someone as qualified as me, what would happen over the next 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months? Well, I wouldn't lease it out. And what would happen then? Well, the guy'd probably pull the listing from me.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, are you okay with that? No, I'm not. Well, why not? Right. So then it's about adding the detail as to like thinking about the day-to-day ramifications. Well, I lose a listing. I lose a client. My boss isn't happy with me. I don't hit my quotas, you know, end up on the street sucking dick for Weed Bix.
Have you ever sort of been laying out that cost of inaction sequence to someone and then just go, oh, no, that wouldn't happen, mate?
All the time.
Yeah. And how do you handle that? Because like that could really happen. So imagine, you know, to stick with the same example, Marco's trying to get his place. He says to them, oh, you know, what will happen if you don't sign someone for 2 weeks? You could lose a listing. And go, mate, this guy, he doesn't care. He wants the right person. Beat it. Like, how do you combat that where they're like, no, I just don't accept the hypothetical you're creating. I don't accept it.
Yeah. So there's some nuance to obviously how you ask it. Like it has to sound like it's genuinely curious. Otherwise, it's like it's very transparent.
Okay, so you have to be careful not to be clearly leading them down the path of this leads to that. You just have to be careful to frame that as genuine curiosity. Like, what would?
Yeah,
I'm
what
curious.
happens then?
Yeah, okay.
You know, and also like the setup for it as well. It's like you've got to kind of set up. You've got to have a few answers ahead of time. So it's like that's where like your kind of solution awareness comes in, where you're like setting the scene of what it is they want.
Okay.
Right. And he's a really qualified applicant, like a very qualified applicant, right?
Yeah.
So you're putting together like, what are you looking for in a qualified applicant? You know, so it's like you understand the boxes that need to be ticked, and they might be difficult boxes or easy boxes or whatever. But he ticked almost all the boxes except for the one, which is the fact that he's a young Italian guy who looks like a drug dealer.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only box that he ticked or didn't tick, you know? And so having an established paradigm or set of facts that you're working off is important. Otherwise, it can be too vague. The other thing is, which we actually discussed in that cost of an action video, which was somewhere over there.
Right there.
Yeah. Which was like...
Or in the comments.
Leading them down emotionally too far. So it's like a lot of people will... They'll future pace out this crazy good success, and then from there they'll go, but what if you never get it? Bah, the devil. Right? And that's just too much of like an emotional bridge for people to walk over. So like you have to kind of take them down to reality. If you're doing this in like a more of a sales environment, the way he was doing it with this guy was far more conversational. Probably took 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's just he knows the kind of some of the questions to ask to get him back in the game. Right? But if you're doing it in sales and you're trying to get much more out of someone and you're really spending some serious time, then what you do is you lead them up the garden path in order to kind of get this great future scenario of, you know, everything lines up, you get the money you want. What do you do with the money? How does that make you feel? What are this, and this? Like, what are all these tangible and emotional benefits of achieving said goal? If you then rug pull them, right, then if you've done a good enough job, then they're not going to believe that that's not possible. Right? So they're going to go, well, no, like I'm going to make it work. It's like, well, yeah, man, I get that. We all want to make it work. What if you don't? Like, no, there is nothing that will stop me. And then from there, you're like, the heels are digging in, and now it's going to be very difficult for you to kind of wind that back. It can be done for sure, but it's a difficult process to wind it back. So what you do, which is the smarter way of doing it, which is bring them up there, then from there go, well, okay, man, like, well, with the skill sets, and you have to be very specific, right? This has to be a really specific question. And if it's too broad, then the answer won't be correct. Okay, so like with the process you have in place now, the skill set and the opportunity, which you have right now, how close are you to being able to achieve that? Like, and it's like the ultimate emotional payoff, right? So let's just say it's like, you know, I used to sell middle-aged women into fitness, right? A lot of them were just recently divorced, and a lot of it was like, look like a neck-breakingly hot in a bikini, so you can figure out where your ex-husband is having lunch with his whore of a girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
And you can walk by looking smoking hot in a bikini and literally break his neck.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, how would that feel? Oh, I'll fucking kill that, right?
Yeah,
like that brings it out, you know what I mean? So I was like, with what you have in place now, how close are you to being able to do that?
Not at all.
Not at all. Well, why not? Right? Explain and then get the detail. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the this. I don't have the this. All they have is the drive. And then from there you go, well, what if that never lines up? What if you don't get the skills and you can use all those things that you mentioned, the opportunity, the skill set, the yada, yada, yada. What if you don't get all those things in place? Nothing changes. Keep doing the same stuff you are now, which has got you to nowhere near that part. What happens then? Right? Then it's very difficult to go, oh, it's not going to happen. It's like, because you just admitted, well, it's happening right now. So if it's happening now, what? Like, there has to be a catalyst to make it no longer be happening, because you're at a fork in the, let's say you're at a fork in the road, like you're currently going down the wrong one. So we've got to change tact and go down the right one. You know?
Tell me about the pauses you use there. So, like, something you do all the time is, especially when you're asking these questions, what if it never happens, right?
It's probably do it subconsciously at this point.
Yeah, but so, I mean, a dream in your voice, right? I've watched so much goddamn video and edited so much content of you. And there's times I see that you're like searching for the next word, and that's natural pauses. And on YouTube, I have to cut those out, right? Because YouTube won't accept a lull in the battle of even half a second.
Yeah.
But there's other times that you give that pause, and it's always in those consequence questions there where it's very intentional. Like I can see there's no way I'm cutting that out. That's not you like stalling and taking half a second to remember the word. You know full well what word's going to come out, but you leave that gap. How aware of that are you, and how intentional is that, and what's the effect of it?
Well, I think like there's a couple of like really interesting tonality. I don't know what they'd be called. I guess like things, right? Like stuttering. Intentional stuttering is super powerful, and it's if you're like what I really want to know is, and it gives the intent that you're really trying to get the gears right. So what you're about to say is really important.
Okay.
So if you want to have that level of importance, you can just go, well, like, yeah. What I really want to know is, and like people will just be like, oh, what the fuck is this guy gonna say, right? Now, if you overdo it, it sounds like you're just an idiot, right?
Yeah.
So all these things, it's like acting. Acting is a really interesting parallel to sales, because in acting, you're trying to get the audience to invoke an emotion. In sales, you're trying to get the prospect to evoke an emotion. And the way that you do that is through like your tonality, your pausing, pausing before or after something will be just because of the way that we naturally talk and the way that this really only works in, say, Western society. Like I couldn't sell someone from China in the same way. Yeah. Because their pauses would be in totally different areas because the language is so different. We're actually incredibly lucky selling in English. English is like, if you had to pick a language to sell in, you'd want English because it's so much more comprehensive than the other language. I think it's more than twice as big as every other language combined. Okay. I think. That could be complete bullshit.
Yeah, don't look that up.
Yeah, but it's a very large language comparatively.
You speak pretty good conversational Spanish, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever sold anything in Spanish?
I have, really poorly.
Okay.
It's sort of like I understand Spanish really well. Yeah. And after a little bit of, I can get back into conversational Spanish pretty easily. But like, I've done it, but it was sort of a lost.
Very clunky.
Yeah, very clunky and sort of, because the way in which a sell is just so, it doesn't lead itself to Spanish.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, right? So like it's hyper specific to English and where the pauses go, and you don't necessarily, even though like Spanish and English aren't too far apart.
No, and we have like guys who's NEPQ in Spanish and French and German and all that kind of stuff, but they just have to work on translating how those pauses work. Because like the verbs and the pronouns are all in different spots. Yeah. So yeah, it just, you'd have to figure that out. Yeah. And you'd have to be way more than conversational. Okay. You'd have to be 100% fluent to figure that out. But like we have a couple of guys in French that are just murderers.
So those guys that have, successfully doing NEPQ in French. Yeah. French is their first language and English is their second, and they've managed to pull from English to put into French, not the other way around.
I've coached a Spanish speaker, a French speaker, and a German speaker, all of which did really well. And the first 6 weeks was us meticulously translating the script. Okay. It was like we had to work together, and it's like, okay, what's the intent of this? And it was like paragraph at a time. Yeah. Because you have to have intent, tonality, pausing, why the pausing is there, so they can work out how to work the pausing into different. It's really complicated, but it like, I probably should have recorded those sessions. Yeah. Probably would have saved us a ton of cash. Yeah. Because if you just translate them word for word, they make no fucking sense.
Yeah. So few things do. I think, only people who only know one language think that there's ever a straight translation for anything. Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, and especially like I haven't spoken in ages, but my Pashto got pretty good. Yeah. And it was like, it's totally different thing. The way you frame conversations, it's all totally different. And I think, like I remember there was a guy, I think there's a couple of Japanese speakers here, but there was a guy I did selection with who was for Japanese. And some of the insults he used to tell us were hilarious. He would like, I won't butcher trying to say it in Japanese, but he was like, oh, the literal translation of that is you wear the pants of a pig. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'd be offended by that. He goes, oh no, that's
trust me, you would.
If you understood,
Could you imagine?
if you understood the intent, you would be highly offended.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, oh, okay, because I'm not.
It's like when Australians throw the C word around,
Yeah,
like it's nothing,
yeah,
and like some Americans think that is appalling.
Yeah.
Some think it's hilarious.
yeah.
Because it's a word you just don't hear over there.
Yeah, so when, I won't say his full name, but when Brett was on exchange with First Group, he, everyone loves him. He's a superhuman. He's one of the nicest guys on the planet. Getting along with everybody super for the first few days. And then he's in the locker room and he's like, hey, what up? And then they're like that. And everyone's cold on him for days to the point where he's like, what happened? Like, how come everyone hates me?
It's like calling someone a jerk.
Yeah, well, the dude goes, you called us all cunts. Like, how do you think we're going to just get along after that? And he's like, oh, no. Like, that's not, like, I meant it in a loving way. They're like, how could you possibly mean that in a loving way? It's like, that's just how we use it.
Yeah.
The more horrific a thing an Australian calls you, probably the more they like you.
Yeah. I'd be insulted if you didn't call me one. Get home all mad. What happened? Pat didn't call me a cunt today.
Yeah.
I think we're drifting apart.
Okay, so Marco's using the NEPQ. He's using all the tactics that he's a killer at.
Disposal,
Yeah, and he's using those in his real life, day to day,
Yep.
to get apartments that he wants. What other examples have you got of that? Certainly, like of your own life.
Well, it was actually one of my sales coaching clients, because I don't do that very often, but he's a really nice guy, so I decided to do it. And he had the same thing where he was like, the rental market in Australia, for those of you who don't know, is like hyper competitive.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like there's 50 families per house. And so
especially at the higher end.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And he messaged me and he's like, hey man, this lady is asking for a bunch of documentation that I just don't have. And I was like, okay. He's like, how do I get around this? And I was like, okay, so I crafted. She was like, hey, can you send us through your BAS and you this and this? He's like, I haven't done that. I was like, okay. I was like, okay. Just to message back, okay, I'm more than happy to get all that for you, but do you mind if I ask you a question? She was like, yeah, sweet. She's like, why do you think my family would be a good fit for this house anyway? Right?
Okay.
So it was distraction by question,
Yeah.
hoping that she would just kind of forget about it. And then I was like, you have to draw information out of her. So over text, she's like, he's pulling info about why he would be such a good fit.
Okay.
And then by that time, she had sold herself into him being, and she's like, oh, don't worry about some of that. It's fine. I think you guys would be a great fit for the house. I'll just go ahead and push through your application.
Okay.
Because like just by asking some simple questions, you just kind of like, you can get people to sell themselves, And there's a couple of different other tricks. Like I'm a huge fan of using the word reasonable. I always use it in sales, always. And so like, would it be reasonable to? And it's very difficult to go, no, it's not reasonable. Like, I think you asked me a question on the last podcast. It's like, what if people are saying, I just don't have the time? And I'd be like, okay, well, let's break it down. What are you actually looking for? Would it be reasonable to spend 6 hours a week on this? Yes, it would. Well, I'm only asking for 4. So do you feel like you can reasonably put aside 4 hours per week to achieve X, Y, Z? Well, yeah, I can. Right? Of course it's reasonable. Right? Because you're not like asking anything like direct, like, will you commit to putting 6 hours a week? It's like, well, I don't know, man. But I go, is it reasonable to do that?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And so we were recently.
And I suppose the function of reasonable is I'm not asking you to commit to doing it. I'm not even asking if you will or can. Just is it reasonable to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite words when you're looking for like a initial stage commitment for something, like, hey, do you think it'd be reasonable to come down to the house and do X, Y, Z? Yes, I would. All right, perfect. When do you think you can do that?
Okay.
Well, if you think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
What are you saying? You want to do it now?
Yeah.
What happened before?
So you're painting them into a corner where for them to disagree, they would have to then admit that they are being unreasonable.
Yeah, and everyone hates being unreasonable.
Snap-a-doo.
Yeah, you're like, don't use it on the wife. Doesn't work. And so like I use it a lot in like my interactions with like, because I rent my house because we tried to buy when we got here, we just fucking couldn't. Like they just there was 85 people for every home. And so we're like, okay, we'll just go and rent. But like, with my agent, like they're just, rental agents, they're just difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
And so whenever I want something done at the house, I'm always like, always start off with a little conversation. Hey, how are you? What's going on? Okay, cool. Hey, I'm having an issue that I think you might be able to help me with. So like codify them as like a, they're good like they're good at their job. And I'd be like, I've been having troubles with X, Y, and Z. Do you feel like it's unreasonable of me to ask the owner to help me with this, and this? And they go, yeah, that seems reasonable. And I go, okay, perfect. Like, when do you think you can speak to them about this? And so from there, like, from doing that, I've gotten like all of the interior window fittings completely redone. I've gotten the laundry remodeled. I've gotten like all of the pool stuff redone at the back. And I've got a couple of like little tiny things. And then right now, because we got broken into again, I'm asking them to redo the entire security system like that. And so like, but all of it's just like little bits and chunks. And in the emails, it's all like, super reasonable this and reasonable that. And would you be open to, and it's all super neutral language. And just coming at things like that, it's so difficult for people to say no to you because you're open, you're wondering. You only ask for small things at a time. You don't ask for big, giant ones. Then once they're doing one thing, like, oh, hey, I know that you're having someone come out to do this. Would it be okay if I got them to do this as well? Like, because they're going to be there anyway. Yeah, perfect. All right, sweet. Thank you. And so it's these little, like, persuasion tactics that, like, it's sort of like, the world is playing checkers and you're playing chess.
Yeah.
So
you're very familiar with Darren Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
he's a fucking genius, that dude.
Yeah, and I was obsessed with his stuff for a long time, and I like when I teach dog training, I use a lot of references to his, especially his older stuff. There's a one called The Experiments, where it's in a house. Everyone's in on it except for the one poor fucker that's getting mind fucked by everyone.
See the guy he made convinced to murder someone?
Yeah, well, so this is the one where they convince this guy that it's an older one where they convince him that he had murdered someone, and he goes and confesses to murder. But the more recent ones where they do actually get people to fucking push someone off a building, right?
Yeah.
And it starts with getting them to just help lay out hors d'oeuvres. Like, and in the show, he sort of explains that if I can't get this, we don't even continue. And in the actual episode of it, it follows one guy, but it turns out there were multiple. Right. And because it doesn't always go the way that they need it to. So they play it all out. And it starts by can you help me lay out these hors d'oeuvres? And then it's like, okay, now that you're in the process, it's like, can you just help me put these meat ones on the vegetarian plate? No one will know. And it's like, it just keeps building and building and building. Yeah. And so that, like, it's that habit of like, following along, like you do something little, do a bit more, a little bit more. There's also that law of reciprocity as well. They help them out a little bit and it all comes back. How do you bring that sort of mindset into a sales call? Because I understand it's the same thing. You're building the momentum of the person going along with you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're building the idea that you're agreeing with me, and that's why you're asking questions
I think like the yes train, like there's an old, which I think is kind of outdated, but there's an old thing in sales where it's like you want to ask 9 yes questions.
Okay.
So the 10th one will always be a yes.
Okay.
I don't think that's true.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure it would be for a very susceptible percentage of the population, but not for most people because like it's just very easy to get a yes. So like a lot of the time, like in cold calling, like you'll want to ask a no question to begin with.
Okay.
Because no questions are more considered.
Okay.
Right? Like, have I caught you at a bad time?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Like, hey, have I caught you at a bad time? No, it's fine. Like
okay.
that. Do you have 2 minutes to talk? Yes. Right? Like, so it's like, if you want to get someone's attention or get them to think, negative answers are always more considered.
Is there any data on that, or is that just kind of what people think?
I don't know. Like good cold callers always open with a no.
Okay.
Usually. Don't usually open with a yes. There's a part of NEPQ called the 2 truths questions.
Okay.
Which is like there's always 2 truths. And it's not that prospects lie to you. It's just that they won't always tell you the whole story. But like nor should they.
Yeah.
Like you're 5 minutes deep into a call and you're like, hey man, like who the fuck are you, right?
Yeah.
So like they're gonna tell you like if there's a vulnerability scale, right? Like they're not willing to exchange large amounts of information that makes them vulnerable, right? Like emotionally vulnerable. Like telling someone your goal. Like if you were to sit here and tell me like what your deepest, darkest, like this is what I want to achieve in life, that creates vulnerability, you know? And so usually the way that I look at it, vulnerability is like a handshake. Like no one ever, like you have to put a hand out in order to get a handshake, right? Someone's got to initiate that. So like if I want you to shake my hand, I have to put my hand out. If I want you to be vulnerable, I have to give you something.
Sure.
You know, whether it's even just really good listening.
Okay.
You know? So there's an element called the two truth question, which I thought is a really interesting area. And I do it slightly differently to how Jeremy does. So basically it's like, hey, it sounds like things are going fairly well for you. So basically I would go like, what are you currently doing at the moment to, you know, get better at sales? And you'd be going this, and this. Okay, how long have you been doing that? What caused you that way? Okay, well, do you like what you're doing with sales training at the moment? And if they went yes, I'd say perfect. Like, what do you like about it?
Okay.
Right? And then I could kind of go, okay, well, that sounds like it's going fairly well. Is there anything you would change about either this or this? Now, I always do like a process and an outcome. So I go, okay, well, man, it sounds like things are going fairly well for you because you've said yes, right? And you go, is there anything that you would change about, I guess, either the process that you're using to get better at sales or maybe the outcomes that you're getting from that process, if you could? So now it's like you're going to give me a much more considered answer, except for just like, yeah, it's going well. So now I'm like, yeah, it's going well, but give me the second truth.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's going fairly well. But is there anything you would change about X or Y if you could?
Okay.
So I get the second truth. Now, whereas Jeremy, if they say no, then he just bypasses that and he goes straight into like, well, tell me what's not going well.
Okay.
But for me, I actually like then forcing them to a yes. If I go, well, like, do you like the sales training methodology that you're using at the moment? No, I hate it. Well, I go, man, it can't be all doom and gloom. Like, you're doing it at the moment. You obviously don't hate all of it. So what do you like about it? Like, give me a positive.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, no salesperson's ever asked them that.
Okay.
So it's a very unsalesy question to be like, tell me the good things about what you're currently doing.
Okay.
So, like, to me, it's very disarming. Like, people are like, oh, well, then they actually have to think, right? Now they've got to go, well, I guess I like the fact that it's easy to follow. Perfect, man. Now, it sounds like it's not going terribly for you, and I'll change that modifier of like fairly well or terribly or okay or whatever, depending on kind of like the reaction they give me. I go, but is there anything you would change about, I guess, either the process you're using or the outcomes that you're getting if you could? Then from there, because like it's no longer a pity party, it's not, no, I hate it, nah, right? They've gone into something positive, and now I'm asking them about a more considered negative. I get so much better feedback from that.
Okay.
Because like I'm asking them to think. Like I don't want these like automatic reactions, because like people who are unhappy about something will have like 3 or 4 surface level things that they don't like. But it's the ability to kind of get below that to the real thing that's fucking bothering them, and like the real thing that's keeping them up at night, or, you know, they got that itch for. That's what you want to get to.
Yeah.
And so
how important is it though that your offer solves that specific problem that they've brought out? Like if they bring out that, you know, they say the thing I don't like about whatever you're pitching, and they already have a version of it, stick with sales training, right? Okay. The thing I don't like about it is that a certain sales trainer doesn't let me, makes me use a virtual background with his name all over it and make it look like I'm in his office, and he makes me wear a suit when I'm on sales calls, so that when I'm on the training call, so that he could use it in his YouTube videos. Yeah. I don't like that. And then how important is it that like you can solve that specific problem, or is that important at all? You just want there to be problems?
Yeah, so it really depends. Like if it's something that I think is somewhat innocuous and it doesn't really matter, I'll just kind of roll through it. If it's something, if they go like, you know, let's say I'm using sales process, for example. Like, well, like, do you like your sales process now? No, I don't. Well, it can't be all doom and gloom. Like, what do you? It's like, you know, and they go, like, let's say the problem that they come up with, or they say, no, I don't like it, is like, I hate the amount of leads that I'm getting.
Okay.
Or the amount of people I'm getting into the sales process. Now, I can't help with that. So I go, well, let's control what we can control. Sales and marketing are 2 different things. Right, so let's talk about your sales process, right? And I kind of get them back on track, because one of the things that you don't want to do is, which is why salespeople talk too much. They talk too much. Let the prospect talk too much. They start getting into problems that they can't solve. Okay, you know, like it's probably similar like with dog training. Like they probably start going into fucking all types of things about their family and their house, and you're like, oh, I don't care. Like that's nothing to do with me. You know, so you got to kind of like, but if you're trying to sell them into something, like, and they're all of a sudden uncovering all these problems that you can't solve, and then now you're only going to solve that problem. There's so many other problems. They might not like put enough weight on the one that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's why it's like you need to have really pointy. I call it like staccato, like the musical term, like where the note doesn't ring out at all, right? Like I like to think of my conversations in sales as quite staccato.
Okay.
It's like I'm not going to let the melody ring any longer than it has to.
Okay.
So once
they hit that beat, you interrupt.
Yeah.
Good time to talk about OODA loop.
OODA loop.
That's what it is.
It is. So go over. Tell us what it is.
Well, we did discuss this on a couple of podcasts ago, and if people were interested, comment, and they did. So the OODA loop it's a military term. Boyd's OODA loop, he was a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And it's observe, orientate, decide, act. And that's the sort of, whenever anything happens, that's the decision-making process that people go through. You don't need to learn about the OODA loop in order to use it. Observe, orientate, decide, act. That's what's going to happen whenever it goes down. But the reason we learn about it is because you want to interrupt someone's OODA loop. And so I suppose, and you can keep them in the cycle of having to re-observe, reorientate, redecide, and before they get a chance to act, you interrupt and you change a variable. Change anything that then means they have to go back. Okay, re-observe, reorientate, redecide, changing variable. Shit, I got to go again. So that would be exactly what you're doing there if someone starts trailing off about their problem that you've brought to attention that you don't actually want to spend any more time on. You have to interrupt that OODA loop.
That's why having an active role in the conversation is quite important. Like if you're selling someone, you'd be like, okay. Oh, okay.
Those feedbacks.
Yeah, because if you never stop talking, it's very easy to interrupt people. If you're dead silent for 2 minutes and then go, oh, hang on a second. Okay, it's usually going to be quite abrupt. Also, I use a vocal lead-in. I go, well, you sort of mentioned this. Do you mind if I ask you about that? Right, and I'll almost always do it that way, where I'll ask them about something they just said, and I'll always ask them a question about them. I'll never interrupt to give an opinion.
Okay.
It's a waste of time, right?
Yeah.
Even if I want to give an opinion. First of all, your opinion is garbage in sales. Like, the mantra that I have in my head is everything I say is garbage, everything they say is gospel.
Okay.
So, like, I have to get them to tell me everything that I want to say.
Okay.
You know? Because, like, if I say, well, your sales sucks and that's why you don't make enough money, this just means nothing. I'm a sales guy. Like, I'm trying to sell them into sales training. They need to tell me their sales sucks and that's why they're making no money. And so I have to ask them very strategic questions to get them to admit to all those things. And, like, my sales is like just a constant opening and closing of doors. Like, there's a problem. I can choose to, if they say something problematic, like if a sales guy is talking to me about lead quality, I don't really want to get into that conversation. I can't control it. I can't help him with it, So, like, I can choose to ignore it, and that could be the right move. I can choose to fix it there and then, or I'll know that, like, I have to fix it during a component of the process.
Okay.
And so, like, that's why people who are really good at selling, like, that sort of OODA loop is, I guess it's constantly happening because, which is why it's really difficult to be good at selling when you're learning a new method.
Yeah.
And I tell people that, like, if you're coming into, say, the NAPQ sort of methodology and you're learning it, like, the best thing you can do is just learn your script back to front as fast as humanly possible. Just memorize it so that that's just one less thing to think about. Like, if you can just rattle it off and sell someone with no script but still take them through it, then you don't have to think about that component because it's just muscle memory at that point. So what you want to do is then you can be having the conversation with yourself. And you're like, is this a problem or is this good? Okay, this is good. Okay, I'll let them keep going. Oh, that's good. Not too far. Stop. Oh, sorry, you sort of mentioned this. What do you mean by that? Then you just keep going. Okay, cool. I have what I need. Next phase. So what's my bridging question to the next phase? What's the next part of the cycle? And that's where you just have your script up next to you and you just flash over for a second. You see the first letter. You go, well, just so I can see the rationale. Like, you know exactly where to go. And so if you can, and if you can rattle those, if you read it, that's the thing people fuck up, right? Like, they get their script up and it has it, like, next to them on Zoom. Just so, like, I don't care. Like, it's really difficult to read something, even if you know it really well, without it sound like it's being read.
Yeah.
So if you
that's the magic skill that presenters have. Like that is the secret sauce to being a presenter, being able to read a script. So few people can read a script and have it sound natural.
Yeah. That's why like I can't even I can barely take notes for a presentation. It comes off terrible.
Yeah.
So I just need to go, okay, this is what I'm going to chat about. As long as I'm talking about something I know about, I can rattle off for an hour or two. It's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. But yeah, like if you can look down a teleprompter and read it, that's so difficult to do. Like so hard.
Yeah. And have people not realize that you're reading a script. It's fucking impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real skill set that takes a lot of time to actually learn and develop. But like for me, it's just, okay, I'll just memorize the crap out of it. And then from there, like you can deliver those verbal pauses that we were talking about before. Like I pause for effect before, pause for effect after. Like you can slow your pacing down. Like if you need someone to think about stuff, or you want to like invoke introspective thought, right? Then like you talk about a non-existent third party in ways that they can. So like one of the things that like everyone makes themselves the hero of the story, right? Like when you watch Thor,
you're the main character.
You're Thor.
Yeah.
You know, in reality, you're the dog trainer, podcast guy in Asgard. I'm the fucking sales dude trying to swindle everyone, right? Like that's our roles. Like we're not Thor, right? You know what I mean? Like
but you could imagine if we were.
We could imagine, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago,
different story.
We were doing something. Yeah. But not still probably not Thor. But right? Hey guys, Fat Thor's back.
I didn't want to say it.
So yeah, so you can like everyone does that. That's a real trick that people need to learn. People need to learn. So like you can tell a story that's about no one in particular, and if you do it right, they will always place themselves. Like I had this thing called the island analogy. I don't use it very much anymore because I find the better you get at sales, the less tricks you need, because you can just use tonality and pausing to kind of like.
Okay, well, I'm dog shit, so teach it to me.
I created this analogy. I don't know where I created it or why. I was on a sales call one day and I said it just out of the fucking blue. Because like essentially there's a couple of problems that people need to solve, right? The first thing is they need to, people need to be acknowledged for having taken the first step, which is at least admitting there's a problem and a solution, right? So anyway, I was like, okay, if I talk about a problem and about a bunch of people going and about the different outcomes, I was like, I can create a story where they'll place themselves in where they are and where they want to be. So I was like, okay, man, picture an island surrounded by water. And I was like, and there's a bunch of people on this island, and every single decision that they make is always underpinned by the fact that they're on an island surrounded by water all the way to the horizon with limited resources, right? Because we're all making decisions from the perspective we have, and they're on an island at sea level. They can see, 17.1 nautical miles or whatever it is. And so every decision that they make, man, is like, fuck. No matter where they walk around, the view is the exact same. I was like, the problem is, for the people there are jungles, there are mountains, there's many things of which they cannot see because of where they are. So they need to get from sea level, from the island, to on top of the mountain, like say Everest, right? Because at Everest, you take in more information. Therefore, your decision-making process is better. Does that seem reasonable?
Absolutely, makes sense.
Sweet. The problem is, like, they can't see the mountain. So you get all these people walking around, and the first group of people just, like, they just walk around, hoping and praying that the mountain will someday present itself. Sweet. But, like, all they're going to do is just walk a track plane around the mountain. Right? So the first difficult decision that has to be made is you have to believe the mountain's there. Right? You're here, you're on the call, you know that there's more available to you. So like, congratulations, you've taken the first difficult step by at least acknowledging the fact that there is a mountain, even though you can't see it. Now, the second and really difficult one is to pick a direction, because there's no way of knowing whether or not the direction that you've picked is right. There's no way. And you will never know until you either drown or get there. Right? But I mean, like, I'd rather drown than just be stuck with a bunch of people walking around a mountain, hoping that the mountain presents itself one day, right? So First difficult decision, believe it's there. Second difficult decision is picking a direction. And the third and most difficult, and the one that most of those people on that island will never take, is they start walking in that direction, knowing full well they may drown, in the hopes that you get there. And so, like, let me ask you a question, Pat. How much longer do you want to spend walking around that island?
Okay.
Hoping that one day.
I gotta get off this island.
You gotta get off the island, Pat.
I'm in.
So, like, at no stage, like, you sort of mention the person, but you sort of start putting yourself in the position and, like, thinking about it and visualizing it and going like, oh, okay. And it sort of starts to make sense.
Yeah.
Why it's a difficult decision. And I think, like, in sales, we want to, you know, Cardone has a great line. I don't know if it's a real sales call or a fake sales call, but it's a sales call he did on YouTube. And his guy is sitting there trying to sell this guy into like a 3-year, $2,000 a month program, right? And this guy's selling him and doing a shit job of it. And Grant fucking comes over. He's like, this is Grant Cardone, right? And does the whole thing. And the guy goes, $2,000 a month, it's a lot of money. He goes, you're not making a $2,000 a month decision. He goes, you're making a $36,000 decision. He goes, big boy decisions, big boy results.
Yep.
Right? And he goes, so you going to make the fucking big boy decision or what?
Yep.
Like that. And I was like, it's actually a really, I mean, that's like.
That's high risk, right?
That's the blunt way of doing it. When you're Cardone, you get away with it, right?
Yeah.
That guy was going to say yes just because of the fact he was talking to Grant, right? It's fucking, and you can just, when you got that authority, you just start smacking people with it, right?
Yeah.
But, like, it's a really good point of, like, I think in sales, people try to minimize the importance of the decision too much, where it's like, no, like, this is a really important decision. And, like, I want you to make an important decision, an important and informed one. And so, like, by saying it's easy to take these steps to drop $18,000 in sales training or $30,000 on Amazon or even fucking $600 on fucking whatever, right? Like, the risk to you is relative to, like, how much water's in your bucket, you know what I mean? And so, like, by minimizing it, like, I think it's doing the prospect a disservice, and I think the salesperson as well, because, like, if you realize this is an important decision, then, like, you can use that as, like, well, like, when was the last time anything substantial happened from an insignificant decision? You know, like, if you want a substantial or significant outcome, like, you have to make it an equal decision.
Yep.
You know, like, the decision to have children carries tremendous weight. Right?
Tell me about it.
And but like, also, like, the significance that you get from it carries equal weight. You know, and so I think it's you know, by that island analogy, like, it tends to sort of, like, it adds significance to the decision because, you know, it's like, this is difficult and I understand this is difficult and there's 3 difficult choices and each one of those choices is a barrier of entry, right? And generally speaking, the harder something is to get into, the better it is, you know?
So that island analogy and keeping it in a third person probably increases the amount of empathy you can give to the difficulty of that decision, right? Because it's not you and it's not me, it's someone else. And we can talk about how hard it is for that person and empathize with that hypothetical person. Yeah. And therefore bond over our own feelings of it while it's neither of us have that feeling, this other entity does.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of, like, little things like that I sort of created, you know, to sort of give a visual or, like, third-party aspect. Like, when I was have, like, that deer and bear analogy, I think I've said before, which is, like, you know, there's a deer and a bear. Yeah. That deer, you know, just being cute, and then all of a sudden the deer sees and it's like, oh, the fuck out of that deer. You know what I mean? Starts running towards it, and the fucking deer takes off. Like, who gives up first? Yeah. You know, and so that is, like, a completely animal, like, everyone answers the same way. The bear will give up first. Why? Because it can just pick something else, right? The deer has its life on the line. There's a level of significance behind the decision to stop. It knows it's going to get fucking dead. So I think, you know, like, having that in that impartial third party truism, you know, I think it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, and it makes more sense to then give weight to the decision and then actually, like, okay, no, I need to make a decision. So it makes it easier.
I've used that deer and bear one, you know, in other circumstances. And I wonder sometimes when you talk about that, like, how many people can really put themselves in the position of the deer. Like, how many people have ever been in a position where if I stop, I'll die?
Yeah.
Like, I wonder how well it works on people who, like, because you and I get that. It's like, oh, no, like, I've been in the position where it's like,
I've been the deer.
If I don't do this, I'm dead. I remember when me and Tim, like, called the fucking JDM on ourselves because we're like, oh, well, this is it. Like, this is the only chance that we have.
Yeah.
And it's like, what else are we going to do? And I think about that every time I say, like, oh, you know, who's going to give up first? They're like, how would I know? I've never been in that kind of situation.
I think the other one as well that you can use is like, and people use, you know, like the burning house analogy. It's like, I think because people have seen a burning house.
Yeah.
Also, like that footage of people jumping out of the building in 9/11.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people have seen, like, you fucking run out of a burning building.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, I think anything that you can equate things back to people's either lived or sort of semi-like lived experiences where they know things, you know? Like, you can picture yourself in a burning building.
Yeah.
If you've never been in one. You'd fucking run out of that bitch like it was on fire.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I ain't getting fucking burned.
Yeah.
And so anything that you can kind of equate back to, I guess, experience or lived experience or things that break it down to, like, its truest, like, most simplest element, you know? Like, because you can choose to move forward or not. You know what I mean? But what are the ramifications of that?
Yeah.
And then, like, why would you not move forward?
Yeah.
And is it because you haven't put any significance to your decision making? Like, oh, just do it later. It's like, well, you probably won't.
Yeah.
You know, like I've heard, as someone who's been in fitness, like worked in fitness for a long time, I've heard a lot of people tell me that they're going to get to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, you probably won't.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, let's talk about the significance of both of those decisions because, like, they are important decisions to make. I
think, and really weighing it up, I think so few people, you wouldn't have that conversation with yourself because it's so difficult. Like, it's no fun to have. It's no fun to really, like, think through the consequences.
Yeah.
To have your hand held and be walked down that path. It's so uncomfortable when you like confront the reality of inaction.
And the problem is I do it so often. I do it to myself all the time.
Really?
Yeah, like, my hand is kind of fucked. This hand is pretty fucked, right? Like, I've got super bendy joints.
Okay.
Like, I'm hypermobile in my stomach.
Yeah.
That's where all my stomach issues come from. I got the peristalsis hypermobility. I can do the splits still to this day.
Yeah.
And I've got crazy bendy fingers. And every time I open something, it fucking shoots pain.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, that just took 10 years off my life. Because, like, as soon as you lose the ability to open shit, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that. So I'm actually, like, because of that happened the other day, I was like, fuck, this is getting to the point where it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm booking in with the physio so I can get some exercises to fucking stop that, because I know the moment I stop being able to open jars, cut food, like, that's when the expiry meter begins.
Yeah.
Like, that is not long, you know? It's one of the reasons why, like, I like lifting weights. Like, I'm back into it now. But, like, the more muscle mass you can carry as the older you get, the better you are.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I'm not going to be a cardio junkie as I'm older.
No.
Like, just lift weights and try and keep as much mass on myself as humanly possible as old as I can possibly be.
Yeah.
Because with my high level of income and advanced in modern science, 220, 250, it's not unreasonable.
At least.
Yeah. But, yeah. So I think, I don't know, that was interesting.
Yeah. If you're still here, you obviously thought
Good
it
on
was. Congratulations. Thanks for sticking around to the end.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think.
See how I go with the outro.
Yeah. Oh, it's my turn?
You can do it, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Coffee is for Closers. If you like the show, like, rate, share, subscribe. The best way to do that is through whatever you're watching/listening on. If you're one of the old faithfuls still downloading it and just audio only, congratulations. Do it there. Otherwise, give us a little like on YouTube, share it around, tell a friend. And if you want to hear about anything specific, get in contact with me in the comments of the YouTube video, and that will drive the content going forward. I think the reality is there's a lot of very high-end sales training information that I am gleaming out of you and we are giving away for free. Because people have actually contacted me like, you should be charging for this. And we're not. So here it is. No. All right, that's it. Goodbye.
Bye.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only.